From the office to a first date, there's a lot of pressure to wear the right clothes for every situation. But clothes don't make the man. With Mack Weldon, you can build a wardrobe that looks polished in any setting and tells the world that you stay you wherever you go. They combine timeless style with modern performance materials to keep you looking good and feeling comfortable all day, no matter what's on today's agenda. Browse everything from shorts and polos to sweats and crews. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 25% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code MACK25. That's MackWeldon.com. Promo code MACK25.
The weather may be cooling down, but the deals are heating up during the Red Hot Sale event at Omaha Steaks. Save 50% site-wide on legendary steaks, beefy burgers, cozy comfort meals, and more. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code HOTSALE when you shop omahasteaks.com today. From tailgating essentials to everyday family favorites, the Red Hot Sale event is your chance to save big on everything you need to serve up fabulous fall flavor. USDA-certified tender steaks, plump and juicy air-chilled chicken, easy appetizers, and even cozy comfort meals for those busy weeknights. And every bite is backed by their 100% satisfaction guarantee. Don't wait. Blaze a trail to omahasteaks.com to save 50% site-wide on steaks and more during the Red Hot Sale event. Plus, get an extra $35 off with code HOTSALE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code HOTSALE. Minimum purchase may apply. See site for details.
You are listening to Autistic Stuff for Autistic People, a podcast in which a few autistic friends talk about their lived experiences and special interests. We are here to invite you into our world as autistic peers, sharing relatable conversations about life as autistic people. This podcast is for autistic people and anyone that lives with, works with, or loves an autistic person. I am Aradia. I am the creatively autistic coach and also the podcast producer for Fox and Raven Media.
I am Cheryl, and I am a holistic empowerment coach, a 40-something Canadian who loves working with other late-discovered autistic women and non-binary folk, as well as autistic spiritual abuse survivors.
I am Patrice, and I'm an IFS-informed practitioner, and my practice focuses on helping autistic women and members of the Irish diaspora.
Welcome back to another episode of Autistic Stuff for Autistic People. We were just talking about a topic. What were we talking about?
Gender socialization and why we struggle to really embody and accept autism given the stereotypes and people saying, oh, you don't look like my nephew.
Right. And when we say we mean people assigned and socialized from birth as female. This lost generation of roughly millennial women, obviously lots and lots of blurry boundaries on both of those terms, but roughly speaking. Those of us who were being ignored throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s because we didn't like trains and bang our heads against the wall in middle school. But nonetheless, we have some very specific unifying experiences that make sense with the light of autism now that we're adults. And that's a very relatable experience, not just for people who were assigned female at birth. There's a lot of boys who don't get diagnosed because they present as quote-unquote female autistic people, which is So lots of us have been lost between the cracks because of these narrow diagnostic criteria, and we deal with a lot of imposter syndrome because of that. A lot of, you don't look like my nephew who's 5 and just got diagnosed. You don't look like my uncle who had to be institutionalized and died when I was 5, right? Like, it just, those sorts of ideas. No, we don't look like that because we've managed to get this far. That doesn't mean we're not struggling, suffering, dealing with intense burnout and other chronic health issues. Referring back to our last episode that we recorded, we were talking about trauma bonding versus just regular bonding and how finding communities of people that share our experiences is really, really powerful. For learning that we're not alone, getting over that imposter syndrome. But let's dig deeper into that. What does it really mean to be missed? What does that feel like growing up? What does that do for our imposter syndrome as adults? Small questions.
You know, Aradia, what comes to mind first of all is I think it's interesting how we're saying this one generation was missed, millennials kind of, and some on the outer edges of that. But also, if I look back in my family, like prior generations also weren't noticed. And, I think it's a combination of things. Like we didn't have the awareness, but also life was just so much slower that my sense, obviously, I don't know for sure, but would it have been easier to kind of just exist as an autistic person in some ways in a society where you're not being pinged a million times a day by emails and text messages and the pace isn't so fast. I like to watch a lot of shows on PBS, Masterpiece, because they're so gently paced and slow. And I just finished watching All Creatures Great and Small, which takes place in England around like the World War II times. And I just thought, if I were living back then and autistic, I feel like 95% of the stresses I experience today wouldn't really be relevant back then. And so when I think about the imposter syndrome today, I think it's really compounded by how fast-paced our society is. And it's made it kind of this really constricting experience to be someone who takes in so much information and needs so much downtime to process that. Our society really doesn't allow for that. In fact, I'd say it actively conflicts with my needs most of the time.
Yeah, I have a bit of a history bug as well, and yeah, industrialization was really bad for people who cannot fit into a 40-hour, or in that time 80-hour work week.
Yeah, you nailed it, Aradia. Yeah.
We need to all be cogs that swap in and out of this machine at the heart of the city. And it's like, yeah, that was not most of human experience. Like most of human existence was like, if you're better at hunting or weaving, you can specialize in that. And like the Industrial Revolution is like, but what if you were all interswappable? And we called you defective if you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that the fact that so many of us couldn't keep up with that machine and being those cogs were one of our first clues that perhaps,
that's right.
That there was, in my mind, there was something wrong with me because I can't do all of this. Of course, there's nothing wrong with me. Absolutely not. But there is something that's wrong with the system that expects that from us. And when we don't fit that system, we kind of start to look maybe for answers, which I find really, really interesting. And I'm looking at it from a couple different perspectives here. Growing up, I did not know I was autistic. I did not know until I was 40. But part of that not knowing was because of the depiction of autism in society and particularly the media as being a issue that only happens with boys, right? Growing up, you see things on television, Sheldon and the Big Bang, or, the Good Doctor, or things like that. Even in schools, like there was no awareness that, the girl who is so overwhelmed with noise and just needs to go in the corner and read a book is actually dealing with some of the same underlying issues as the boy who, cannot sit in that classroom and needs, some extra attention. We show up in different ways due to that socialization and due to those expectations. And then we get responded to very differently, right? Like I was told, oh my goodness, you're a joy to teach. You're so well behaved. You're such a good girl, right? It's, certain boxes that we get put into really early on that make it harder to see outside of that box and go, oh, what are some other things that could be happening right now, right? Like, who am I? And it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah. Having behaviors that are rewarded, but are also internally very maladaptive stress responses. And then it's like, oh, good job disassociating into your book for 8 hours. We love seeing you just quietly read. And it's like, I'm actually quite physically stressed by the fact that I can't stop reading. I would love it if I could be gently interrupted from this. But no, I'm just going to be rewarded the whole time because it's acceptable.
Yeah, that word acceptable. That word acceptable is a big thing. What is acceptable behavior versus what is not? And I was thinking about even things like special interests, right? I saw this video and it was so powerful. She was talking about how, when boys love their sports and they love their team, they can go out and they can go to the matches and they can be yelling and screaming and posting and, they can even destroy things afterwards if their team loses. And that is seen as just being a diehard fan. Whereas, the girl who loves Taylor Swift and has all the albums memorized, oh, that's so, like, oh, come on, like, I don't even think, can't even think of the right word to describe the almost derision that kind of gets tossed.
It's so cringe. It's so immature. It's so
Yeah,
girly. So
girly, exactly.
infantile.
So, like, even just, what we're passionate about, gets viewed differently depending on that, the gender boxes and socialization. Yeah, and I feel like sometimes girls and people raised female and, socialized in that way, we kind of take some of our interests and we try to make them more palatable in order to be acceptable. So, like there's that old saying, like the boy goes out on a hike and picks up rocks. The girl goes to the crystal shop and, gets a whole bunch of pretty crystals and has them all over her house. Like, is it the same? Probably, but it's not seen the same. And then, the conversation around it is different.
The pedant in me as a geologist is like, yes, they're all rocks. Anyway.
I know. I don't disagree. I do not disagree.
They are the same. I can really relate to what you're both saying. I got called conscientious a lot as a girl and have been really reflecting a lot on, I have a really great teacher. She teaches about feminism named Robin Clark, and she teaches a lot about our good girl conditioning. And, what is a good girl? Accommodating, quiet, nice to everyone. Really, I was conditioned into fawning, just kind of what does the other person need and then do it. And when we think about what is the stereotype of like what we've seen as autism is like a young boy having a meltdown, which people interpret as a tantrum, the way we treat girls, tantrums, meltdowns aren't allowed because then you're not a good girl. A good girl behaves. And so that layer of gender conditioning really influenced the way I could operate when I was upset. And so, yeah, things like reading all the books by R.L. Stine, reading all the Babysitter's Club books, that was a way to calm myself. It took me out. It was a flee response in a lot of ways. I'm going to flee into a book because I can't express my upset outwardly because that's not acceptable for a little girl to do. So I'm having to really unlearn that. And it takes a lot of getting to know those parts of me that felt, this is what I'm supposed to do to get love from other people. So it can get deep fast.
Yeah, I still think of myself as an angry person, even though I don't explode that much anymore, because that was how I got categorized as a kid when I couldn't hold my meltdowns inside. And they were just like, oh, you're just a really angry little child. And I still hold on to that as like my Wikipedia summary of myself, even though like it was very much assigned to me because I did not have, I was not being a good girl. I was being a loud, angry, throwing things girl. And now I think of myself as just intrinsically angry. That's just who I am. It's a flaw. I will never, it's like, I don't know if that's actually true, but I've only just begun to pull on that thread, because it's so conditioned.
Yeah, the amount of work that as adults we have to put into looking at those labels and deciding if there is any truth to them at all, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people, whatever the label is, they either own it or they decide to completely go in the opposite direction. And so for a long time, I was like the perfect child. The perfect child. My sister might have been known as the black sheep, but I was well behaved and I was helpful and I was, always obedient, right? Because it was a very religious environment. So that word gets thrown around a lot. And then as I got older, and most of my siblings started falling into the more, I don't want to say palatable, but they were all doing kind of what was expected of them. They all got married, they all had children. And for me, I didn't do any of those things. And I also got very loud about the things that I care about, like social justice and my healing journey. And it became almost like I can't stay in that box any longer. I have to go the direct opposite. And eventually, I mean, my dream is to find that place in the middle of my own inner balance, my own inner truth, not reacting against the labels, but discovering my own truth. But that's the process. That's the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aradia, I want to say I really admire that you were able to access anger even as a child. I don't know if this is true for you, but I wonder if there was some safety for you to be able to do that. I don't like when we're characterized as this person is always that way, like, oh, you're an angry person. How about a person who expresses anger sometimes? Because anger is a natural part of human expression, and it's actually a really healthy thing to tap into, because if we don't, if we just turn it inwards, that's why we have so many women with chronic diseases, with autoimmune diseases. We have a lot of writings now, like Dr. Gabor Mate writes a lot about this. A lot of these autoimmune diseases are women who aren't able to say no in different areas of their life. And the antidote to that is to really tap into this. A boundary is crossed. I am angry. I need to acknowledge and create some safety for myself by saying this is not okay. So anyway, just holding a candle for celebrating your anger.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because, yeah, it has been, yes, the work of my adulthood unpacking to realize that I did have a lot of safety. My caregivers were giving me a lot of safety, that I was able to be like that. It sucked for everyone, but like, yeah, in hindsight, like, well, that's a better container than I thought I had. Like, that's actually kind of cool if I think about it. And also, like, a lot of my anger was, my caregivers attributed it to the fact that my mom left the family when I was 7, which was the result of her having a massive autistic burnout now in hindsight. And like just a few years later, she discovered she was autistic and like started learning stuff and sharing that with me. And she was never good at keeping her anger inside at all. But like, yes, for me as a preteen, starting to learn about autism through her experience definitely kept the safety of that container going. Or all the adults are like, okay, I guess just put up harder boundaries to try to keep this child safe. And this is the other thing I think is good to remember. This is something my mom often brings up, is that autistic children grow up into autistic adults. Both in the sense that the autism doesn't go away and in the sense that the ability to emotionally regulate does get better, just because your brain does cook more, no matter what, traumas and therapies you may or may not be subjected to. Your brain does continue to cook until you're in your 20s. And like, there's a lot of value in forgiving our child selves for like being where they were at and like not being able to mature in the way that we're doing now. I think a lot about parents looking at their kids going, they're never going to change. And it's like, well, but you did. Unidentified autistic parent who exists because the child is autistic, right? Like, we move through these things. It's not static forever. And I think a lot of times it feels like it's going to be forever. This is something I'm really trying to teach myself, is it's not forever.
Yeah. Cheryl, also, you really just described kind of that process for yourself, from childhood to kind of taking this very different path from your siblings. Yeah, I think that was really beautiful, the way you described that.
Oh, thank you. And I just think it's interesting though, as the radio was talking, you were talking about how you said it's like, oh God, my anger, it wasn't good for everybody else. But I think it's interesting, like you're talking about safety and having that ability or that container, that environment that you were able to express that anger. And I think it's interesting because those of us maybe who didn't have that container, who were actively told, no, not acceptable. You clamp that down. You shove that as far into a deep cave as possible. The journey is going to be very interesting as they get older, and as we get older and we start to say, I don't know how to express. As much as we do get better at emotional regulation, hopefully as we get older, some of us go through a period where we don't. We actually feel like we've gone backwards because it's like learning a skill for the first time, right? And it's like everyone else has learned this skill. I am now an adult who has never been allowed to be in touch with that anger in a healthy way, or fear, or disappointment, or grief, or sadness, or even joy. And it's like, oh my God, this is like a whole new world. It's like, I don't know, it's like going on an inner journey of like discovery. And I don't know, I just think that's really interesting that even though we've all been socialized female, we did not all have the same containers. So even that is going to show up differently in our lives of how we relate to other people, how we understand our autism, how we negotiate life.
Yeah. I was 41 when I really was with my anger and in a therapy session realizing, wow, this is anger and I'm with it and I can be with it. It doesn't mean I have to like go do something externally with it, but I could really feel the anger without dismissing it or getting afraid of it. But 41 years old, you know, bottled up until then. You know, kind of how we started this episode was how frustrating it feels when other people will say to us like, oh, you're not what I think of autism. And okay, it actually makes sense from that person's point of view when I think about, well, yeah, I've actually been masking and trying to look like a good girl for 4 decades. So I can actually understand why another person would be surprised that I'm suddenly saying I'm autistic, because in many effects, I have been putting on a performance for 4 decades to try to blend in and look like the most palatable version that everyone will like. So I can actually see from another person's point of view. I still feel angry about it. I still feel angry about not being able to express myself authentically for 4 decades, but I can see how it would be surprising to those who viewed me in a more masked state, that suddenly I'm saying, actually, this isn't who I am at all.
Right. We're performing normativity just fine for your shallow appreciation of my external appearance. Like, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're also performing adulthood because honestly, there's so many people who only think of autism as being, for children,
That's
right?
right.
And
That's
that's
right.
what, I mean, you both have touched on this, but like this mentality of, oh, you don't look anything like, my child. I hope not. Because honestly,
Good point.
my lived experience over the last 4 decades, I should be able to have different things to draw on. And, ups and downs and experiences and failures and successes. Like, I would love it if we could just have a conversation about, the different stages of just regular development and how autism would show up obviously differently at different stages, right? That parent might be saying, oh, you can't be really autistic because you're not like my child. And I really do appreciate where they're coming from because, everyone starts off as children, but, trying to sometimes feel like even fitting not just the gender box, but the age box, right? Like, what am I supposed to be doing at this age? What am I supposed to be, looking like and feeling like at this age in order to almost like prove that I'm autistic? I don't know. It's weird.
It's like it starts at the developmental milestones and then it moves right on into the infantilization of adults. It starts with, oh, well, you weren't walking and talking by the right age, to, oh, well, you're too old to still need help with going to the bathroom or whatever. Like, it's just age discrimination no matter where you're at, because the point is to, push us out of trying to participate at all.
But I wonder if that has anything to do with sorry, I just had a thought here. We can edit this part out because my brains are firing on all cylinders here. The fact that with autism, in order to get a diagnosis, and I understand there's a lot of problems with even that word because of, the medical model of understanding autism. We'd much rather be looking through the neurodiversity paradigm here, and that's all great, but we still live in a real world where for many people, if they want to get accommodations in school or, funding from the government, they have to sometimes go and actually prove their autism to a doctor. And the fact that with autism, most of the diagnostic criteria has to do with how we appear to others. It's not about our lived experience. Whereas if I was going in and say somebody thought I was, something else in the DSM-5, oftentimes it's, well, they feel this, or they see this, they think this. With autism, it's not like that. And I think people have gotten so used to autism being described as how it affects other people, right? How much of a burden I am to somebody else, how much support I need from somebody else. We're not used to actually listening to people and saying, you're autistic. What does that feel like? What is your lived experience of autism? And we don't even get used to it ourselves. Because I mean, for how many years did I think I was a burden because I needed help in different areas, even before I knew I was autistic. It wasn't about, oh, I'm having a meltdown right now because my needs have been violated consistently for days and days and days. I'm thinking automatically, oh, how do I fix this? How do I apologize? How do I make it right so that I'm not as much of a burden on other people? We really need to shift the conversation a little bit into what's going on internally, not just from somebody else's outside perspective. Because then we might have a little bit less division of, those functioning labels and a bit more listening, paying attention, observing, being open to other people's lived experiences.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. That's so many good points. And I think, in this conversation, but really you can't go wrong with if someone shares something with you to respond by saying, wow, what is that like for you?
Revelatory concept.
Yeah, like rather than like imposing your own perceptions or your own kind of projections on that person, just what was that like for you? It opens up a whole world. It invites the person to really share authentically. And I find that if someone comes to me with that kind of curiosity, it puts me at so much ease and it allows for really meaningful connection.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how much this applies to the experience of being socialized female in general.
Yes, yes.
It's just, aren't you happy with this? Aren't you content with that? Like, why are you so
Yes.
angry? Calm down. It's like the entire experience of being socialized female is like, let us tell you how you should feel and what you should do and be completely disinterested in your own internal experience. Like,
Yeah.
the internal lives of women are like such a interesting concept in literature, right? Like this is like as above, so below, right? Like, yes, we're talking about the autistic experience, but like, we're also women who live in the world.
Yeah, we're going through that right now in the US where we've got the administration saying, okay, we're going to pay women $5,000 to have a child.
That's insulting on so many levels.
So many levels. And what I'm seeing is, women saying back like bullet points of like lists of here are the things we actually need. We need childcare that is affordable. We need so many things that your policies could actually help with. $5,000 isn't going to do it, but no one's asking, what do you need? What is this like for you? And even when women are shouting it, they're not being heard. Yeah, so it really is a double marginalization, the autism and being AFAB.
The interesting thing that ties both of those together for me is this concept of one thing being normal and everything else being judged in comparison, right?
That's right.
So men are the standard. Anybody else is being judged accordingly. And I mean, we could talk for hours about how even in, medicine and research, we study men and then we forget, oh, wait, this drug is actually going to be used for women. And oh, wait, like, the hormones are so different. Maybe we should, open up our research pool. But then you have, the autism piece where neurotypicals are seen as normal. And that distinction is really powerful. Like, if we're always judging according to some standard of normativity, everyone else is going to appear to be lacking in some way. There's going to be a deficit, like a focus on deficits, as opposed to, oh, wait, we're different and we're allowed to be. And we're allowed to, I love, Patrice, your question, like, what is that like for you, right? If we were sitting down with a group of very diverse people, what is it like for you? That would open up such a beautiful conversation if you're really willing to listen.
Yeah, it's such a simple instruction. Care about and believe other people's lived experiences. This should not be such a revelation. And yet, it is. It is.
This aspect of our conversation, I think we're touching on how deeply empathetic we all are. And what I've found is actually many autistic women are hyper empathetic, like deeply caring, deeply sensitive about the world, which also contradicts what is kind of the stereotype of autism as boys having no empathy. And, I don't claim to know like the deeper, like neurological underpinnings of all of this, but I just think that is worth stating that that's been very true for me. And, part of why I never would have thought of myself as autistic before hearing other autistic women speak about their experiences, because my whole life has been about, weeping over endangered species or like the ozone layer hole. And, the depth of my care and concern is often overwhelms me. And I've actually had to learn how to create more like energetic boundaries for myself. So yeah, that's a big difference. And what's been left out of the conversation. I think it's getting woven into it more now, but it's been another hurdle for understanding and accepting myself as autistic, as a woman.
It's a really good point. What we talked about earlier, what are some of the stereotypes of autism that we see, in the media or just in general conversation? And if you have a lived experience that is different, it's almost like, oh, well, then maybe I'm not, right? You don't even open up to the possibility of autism when it doesn't seem to match, right? That empathy. Or like I was working with a client the other day, and he had said something about, I can't even remember everything, but basically he's talking about how he doesn't think that he masks, and he basically can walk into any space and just kind of be himself. And as a woman and somebody expected to walk into spaces a certain way, it was such an interesting concept for me, right? And again, I keep going back to television and movies, because I really do feel like that's where we get a lot of our concepts, right? Like you see a show like, oh my gosh, I can't even think of it. Well, like Big Bang, because that is something that so many people have seen, right? Somebody who truly doesn't seem to care that much about other people and how they feel and how they respond to him. Whereas Patrice, you just said that's the exact opposite for you, right? So this is very interesting, going back to like the socialization piece of who we are underneath the mask, but who we are expected to be, and then who we are really.
And, Cheryl, you had spoken about earlier how kind of we have men and neurotypicals as kind of the standard. And so if you're autistic, but you are a man, you still are able to walk into a space and you're considered by your gender expression, the standard. I can't imagine walking into any space and just kind of like not evaluating how other people are seeing me. Am I safe here? Do I look acceptable? Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's unfathomable to me, but I can see how, as a man, you're kind of at the top of the food chain, essentially. And so there is more freedom in that way to kind of not care. And I wonder if that empathy piece is also tied into gender socialization.
It is. And I'll throw in another monkey wrench. We're all white.
That's right.
I was just about to say that. So important. Literally, we can start it with that.
Yeah, let's start it with that.
and even in addition to that, we're not just all white. We all come from different like cultural backgrounds, like within our whiteness. Like I come from, a very, very, very like alternative hippie context. Cheryl comes from a high control religious environment. Like we are very much, I mean, as we've heard in this discussion already, our experiences of anger were wildly different because of how our parents approached it. So expand that out. Like we're all white. We're all from like Anglophone Western worlds. We're all in that space. And like, we all know that like little white boys who are wealthy are the ones that get diagnosed most. So like inversely, right, non-white people they're getting diagnosed way less, although as far as anyone reasonable can tell, they have the same rate of neurotype variability as anyone else because humanity. But like, yeah, we walk into a space and we don't even have to think about the racial component, right? So
just as much as a white man might talk over you and me and everybody in this room, that's how much we can talk over people who are not white. And that is a huge piece of this awareness of, we've talked about autism, we've talked about being a woman, but if you bring in, racial components and, your cultural background and how you just appear in the world based on people's stereotypes and judgments, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in how we're perceived and what rights we have, what privilege we have, right? What obstacles we don't have to face, right? If I walk into a room, most of the time I'll be listened to. Again, not necessarily if I'm going up against a white man, but most of the time I would be listened to. And yeah, sorry, this is just like mind blowing about how many different lenses we can be putting on to kind of understand the lived autistic experience, right? How much colonization, how much just the way we're taught history, right, can infuse our understandings of people.
Big time.
Aradia, you said something I want to repeat because it was so powerful to hear. The who gets typically diagnosed historically are white boys from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. And when we think about who doesn't really have to care as much about social justice issues because they're impacted the least, it's white boys from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. So is lack of empathy really a trait of autism, or is it a trait of class and race?
Or injustice experience.
We probably don't have time for all that, but
Yeah.
but no, the class experience is a massive part of it. Like, I keep bringing up my mom, but like, my parents are a cross-class marriage. My biological parents were a cross-class marriage. And the perspectives I've gotten from my respective grandparents about autism, housing, food, community, social justice, interdependence, it's all different because they're from very different economic classes, and the kind of resources they had to draw on were very, very different. And that has very much influenced how they have both approached the autism revelations within our family. So like, yeah, that's important too. What you have access to, what you don't have access to.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's be honest, even getting a diagnosis or identifying as autism, whether you choose to go with an official diagnosis or not, there is a level of privilege in that. Because if you are already marginalized in a multitude of ways, adding in another marginalization, it may not be sustainable for you. It may not be something that you can survive within your professional and personal spaces and from a survival perspective, right? So even having the opportunity for me to say I am autistic out in the world, right? There is a level of privilege to that I think really has to be acknowledged.
Deeply. Deeply. I've been thinking about it a lot, both with respect to the fact that I can afford to explore being a coach full time because I don't need to for survival reasons. And also the fact that I'm just like putting autism like loud, square, centered in my professional existence. And like I'm doing this like as the national conversation and the international conversation towards eugenics is just like, this is a great time to just be like, I am marginalized. TM. Like, what an interesting choice I am making. But I have the privilege to explore that and to take that visibility and like actually risk it to whatever extent that is. Which, yeah, I think would be a lot harder to do if I was worried about keeping a roof over my head. It just,
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important that we do this, that we do band together and say, this is autism and these are our different perspectives, because it can help others as this story gets more understood and more visible. I just wanted to touch on what you're saying about like the multiple lenses of perception and shame. So when you're not at the top of the food chain, there can be a lot of internalized shame around not having the power and the privilege that a neurotypical person might have or a white person might have. In my own healing journey, I've uncovered a lot of shame around my ancestry. I'm of Irish descent. The Irish were colonized by the British and they lost their land, their language, their culture. I've had to do a lot of being with the shame of feeling less than because all these things were taken. And so just wanted to state that these things are present. And so when we're looking towards ourselves, when we're looking at other autistic people, and just really holding that shame is so hard to be with, and a lot of us are likely carrying a lot of it. And so I'm just feeling a lot of compassion for our community and all the different ways that can play out given our different identities.
Yeah, I think we should definitely emphasize to anyone listening to this and to ourselves that, there is no shame in the ignorance that we're clawing our way out of and the socialization that we're having to unlearn. Like the mistakes that you have made because you thought you were neurotypical and just needed to try harder, or like, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. I personally at least experience a lot of shame. Like, I should have known better. I should have figured this out sooner. I should have been more curious. And it's like, we are where we are. It's okay. And like, I have a very complicated relationship to shame because I thought I didn't have any for a long time because my parents put so much emphasis on how you need to not be ashamed of anything. So I just reassigned shame feelings to other emotions. And now I'm finding shame in the strangest places. Like, what? I thought you were embarrassment. What do you mean you're actually shame? I thought you were anger. What do you mean you're actually shame? It's been a whole process. And I think that as women, as people who are socialized to be women, we're told that we can save the world through taking all the shame on ourselves. And we can't, and we shouldn't. Even if we could, we shouldn't. It's not our job.
Yeah. I know inside me, the voice of the shame is saying, it's not okay to be me. And this journey is about from talking to each other, from building these communities, from being with the parts of ourselves that feel really hurt. It's unburdening that belief that it's not okay to be me and bringing in a feeling of lightness that actually it feels pretty okay to be me. I kind of like me and it's nice.
Yeah, and no one can be you as well as you can. Like, right? Like that little cutesy meme, like in a world where you can be anything, be yourself.
That's right.
And if you don't know who that is yet, that's okay too.
Absolutely.
I want to just highlight that
That's
because
right.
some of us, I will say I'm a little bit, some days, yeah, and some days not so much, but there is that sense of like, I'm still learning about who I really am. And I'm still noticing like the layers that I might show up with in certain situations. Like, oh, no, I don't think I need that anymore. I can let that go. But it's okay if you're wherever you are on your path. And I think this is one of the big reasons, I mean, why representation is so important. Like the more we start to see people talking about autism and like their authentic lived autistic experiences, both in real life and in the media, we start to have a different perception, different dialogue, inner conversations, with our own their own inner being. I still remember the first time I saw a character on television that was like me. It happened only a couple years ago. It was the first autistic woman on a TV show that was so much like me, I cried because I had never seen myself represented before, ever, not in any way, shape, or form. And this show like opened up so many different things in my heart, right? I mean, and for anybody who wants to watch, it's called The Extraordinary Attorney Wu, and it's just this woman. She's a
Oh.
lawyer and she's highly intelligent, but she has so many struggles with the day to day and social communication, and just there's this one line, and I will never forget it. She's This one scene. She's standing outside of this revolving door. The ones where you have to kind of like figure out the timing before you jump in, and she's standing there and she's trying to like figure out when to move, and she has this inner thought and she says, how can I remember every single book that I have ever read since I was 3 years old and not know how to use this revolving door? And it was like this, like something broke inside of me, because it was like my entire life I couldn't explain to people why, on the one hand, yes, intelligent, does well in school, and on the other, the things that are so easy for everyone else is like agonizing for me. So I think that even that, seeing myself represented tapped into a lot of that shame of not being good enough and not being okay with who I am. But when we see it on television or in a movie outside of ourselves and we go, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not alone. Like there's other people out there, and I think that's really powerful.
Thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. That was awesome.
Well, on that note, it has been 44 minutes, and that was a lovely note to end on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was, yeah. Very powerful ending, yeah.
I think we will call that. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. And if you're interested in following us and what we're doing, you can look in the show notes for links to all of what we've got going on, or you can check out our collective website at, I believe it is autisticcoaches.com. I will learn this eventually. And otherwise, like, subscribe, share. Share us with a woman in your life who needs to know that it's okay to be herself and to not know who herself is at the same time. Share us with that person.
And it's okay if a self is a process. It can keep evolving.
Yes. Life is a process.
It's not a fixed point. Yeah.
I've been reading the parable of the sowers. So if you know, you know.
So next time you show up, we might be different.
We will be different. As a reminder, we are all peer support coaches within the Autistic Peer Support Coaching Collective, offering a variety of free and paid intentionally autistic spaces. You can learn more and follow us at our website, autisticcoaches.com. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, peers, and anyone who lives with or works with or loves an autistic person. Someday we will have a tip jar when I get over my executive function issues and make that happen. Thank you for listening to us talking about autistic stuff for autistic people. Autistic Stuff for Autistic People is a production of Fox and Draven Media. For more podcasts from Fox and Draven Media, visit our website, foxanddravenmedia.com.